Hello and welcome to the History of Aviation Podcast. This is Derrick Beeler, and I am out here on location today at a private airstrip in somewhere Tennessee. We are out here, and Allison asked me if we could talk to her dad, which is, in my opinion, a legendary pilot. So we're on location out here at the hangar with Ernest Hand. But first off, Allison, how are you doing?
I'm good. Glad to be here today. I'm glad to hear some wonderful aviation stories from my dad. So let's start off. What got you started interested in flying to begin with?
Well, my association with aviation goes back into World War II. Next month, I will be 88 years old, so I do remember World War II. I grew up on a farm that was between two air bases outside of Waco, Texas. Multi-engine on one side of town, fighter and basic training on the other. So I got to see a lot of airplanes flying around. But at the end of World War II, things were just sort of in a lull with me in aviation. I decided I wanted to learn to fly, so I took my first flying lessons when I was 15. Well, I couldn't pick enough cotton or to chop cotton to pay for flying lessons back then, which was $4 an hour dual.
Wow.
So my aviation career just sort of was at a standstill. And then when I turned 17, I joined the Navy Reserve in Dallas, Texas, and I was in a fighter squadron, and I watched all the jet airplanes come, and the pilots would get out and go to the old club, and I figured, well, that's for me. So instead of, when I joined the Navy Reserve, I made it up to E5 as an aviation electrician, which was mainly working on the electrical systems in fighter aircraft. But on the ramp in Dallas, it was mighty hot in the summertime, so
I bet.
I decided I wanted to be one of them guys flying the airplanes instead of working on them. So jumping through about 9 million hoops, I got in the naval flight training through the NavCat program. It was a very selective thing back then because there was no wars going on. Nobody was mad at each other in the world. So the Navy took in 3,200 a year with the idea of completing 1,200. So there wasn't no second chances when you finally got into the flying part. The academic part was fairly rigorous, but I never had any trouble with academics. But anyway, 23 months later, I got a pair of golden wings, and that was in 1959, and I was assigned to a patrol squadron outside of Seattle up in Whidbey Island, Washington, and flying P-2Vs. So I did that for 2 years, but we accumulated a lot of flying time because the Russians used the Black Sea up there a lot for their fishing fleets and submarines. So a typical month of flying was about at 80 hours, maybe up to as high as 100. So you really got to do a lot of flying.
Let me ask you a question. While you were in the Navy, what's one experience that stands out to you?
Oh, Lord. What one? I guess it's when I flew 3 gentlemen from Quonset Point, Rhode Island to Haiti.
Okay.
And to this day, I don't know why, I was told I had to go do it. I wouldn't even see the men that I flew down there. and they was met by somebody in a black limousine. My flight crew was put in a motel and said when we was ready to go back, they'd come get us.
That's interesting. Well, let me ask you this. So you're a naval aviator. What was it that changed where you wanted to become a commercial pilot?
Okay, I had 3 tours of duty in the Navy. That one at Whidbey Island, Washington, in VP2, and then they was advertising for volunteers to go on Antarctic expeditions. So I volunteered, and I was accepted, and I got into an experimental squadron up in Quonset Point, Rhode Island, that we deployed to McMurdo Sound, Antarctica, twice a year. Well, that was probably the most enjoyable flying I did in the whole time I was in the Navy. First year, I flew a P2V that was doing high altitude photography. In the second year, I flew the Otter, which was a bush plane, and I was a bush pilot for the Navy for a year. But then after that, my tour duty with VX6 was over, so I got assigned to the training command. And I was in VT-31 trying to teach prospective aviators how to fly a multi-engine airplane. Well, that was quite challenging. And Vietnam War was going on at the time, and we got 1 day a month off because we were short of pilots in the squadron all the time. So the ones of us that was left had to do primarily double duty. Well, a typical flying month in the training command in that squadron was 100 hours a month. So, needless to say, it wore you down pretty quick.
So that's what pretty much you said, I'm ready for something different.
So, I was ready for something different. So, the airlines was really hiring at that time. So, I thought, well, I think I'd like to be an airline pilot. So, I applied to about 4 airlines, and I was accepted to all of them except one. Then I had to decide which one I wanted to go to work for. Well, I chose Delta because they had bases where, I could be, because I'm primarily from the South. I didn't want to be up in Chicago or, above the Mason-Dixon line, so I chose Delta. And I was assigned a flight training class back in
65.
1965. Mm-hmm. Well, there's where it started. And at the time, the airline industry was exploding. I finished ground school. That was 3 months to become a flight engineer on a DC-6 and 7. Well, I no longer got qualified, and I could fly co-pilot on the Convair 440. Well, I no longer got situated in that job. Then I found out I could fly co-pilot on a Convair 880. Well, I did that for about 4 years, and then I found out I could be a captain on a DC-9.
So you moved up pretty fast.
Yes, the airline was just exploding. It was just adding new routes right and left. And also, under Jimmy Carter, the airline industry was deregulated. Mm-hmm. So the airlines could pick up any kind of route they wanted. Well, I was flying the DC-9, and I was fairly junior on it, with only 5 or 6 years of seniority. But anyway, I moved off of the DC-9 because they were going to close the base in Houston where I was domiciled, and went to Atlanta and started flying the 727 as captain.
Let me ask you right there. The difference between the DC-9 and the 727. What did you like one plane over the other?
Oh, yes.
Which one did you like the best?
727.
Me too.
Yes.
Me too. My favorite plane.
And I like the pay difference also.
Well, of course.
Okay. I like the 727 so much, I flew it for 14 and a half years
Wow.
as captain for Delta Airlines.
So now, once you finally came off of the 727, that's when you went on the 767.
Yes.
And then you flew international routes. Now, what was it like for you to go from domestic flying to international flying?
Well, it was a very easy thing for me to do because it was a complete different bird of a cat, different cat. And the hardest thing to get used to was going from analog instruments in the 727 to digital in the 7.5 and 7.6.
Right.
That was a tough thing because, I flew the analog instruments in the Navy and in the beginning of my career in the airline. And then all of a sudden they get these new airplanes that are strictly digital.
Well, once again, as we talk about the evolution of aviation,
Yeah.
you have to roll with the times.
That's right. You have to roll with the tide. But to me, international flying was very easy. A lot of people could not adjust to the time changes, but it didn't bother me at all.
Did you have a favorite city you liked flying to?
Probably Berlin.
Why?
Wow.
I don't know. Berlin is just a clean New York City.
Mm-hmm.
So much going on there. We'd have generally typical layovers there about 24 to 36 hours. And a lot of museums, a lot of, things to occupy your time with, bars and what have you.
Of course.
So anyway, I really liked Berlin.
Okay.
I'll tell you some places I didn't like.
Okay. Let's hear some.
Moscow and Helsinki, Finland.
Okay.
And I didn't like Bombay, India.
Okay.
I don't know what it would take for me to go back to those places, but it'd be a lot. But
well, the good news is you got to go to them.
Oh, I got to go to places that I would have never thought I would go to in my life. I've been all over the world flying, except the Orient, and the only reason I haven't been to the Orient, I didn't feel like I lost a thing over there. So my flying with the airline was primarily east to Europe and some into the Middle East. But anyway, there was a lot of flying involved in international and a lot of time off. And it paid very well. So that's...
Let me ask you this. What the differences between a naval pilot and a commercial pilot? What were some of the challenges?
Okay, as a Navy pilot, you was sort of a captive of the Navy's wishes. The Navy would give you a mission, and they expected you to fly it. How you did it was your business, but they expected you to get results. You didn't say, "I don't want to do that." That was not an option.
Okay.
The Navy controlled you. With the airline, you had control of your destiny. You could basically fly where you wanted to go, when you wanted to go, and what airplane you wanted to go in.
Okay.
So that was the difference, and the pay scales was rather different.
Exactly.
So, but anyway, with my 32 and a half years with Delta, I accumulated a lot of flight time.
Oh, I bet.
So tell me tell me a memorable experience that you had with Delta.
Well, I flew just about every celebrity that you knew in the time, like Bing Crosby.
Wow.
I flew him and shook hands with him and talked to him a minute, and a lot of the, rock and roll stars.
You flew Elton John quite a bit.
Elton John. Oh, yeah, Elton John was on the airplane all the time. And
I love the story that you would tell me about the Doobie Brothers, that you flew them and you came home and called, what were they, long-haired hippies?
Yeah.
Well, you had to take the good with the bad.
Oh, I tell you another one that I remember was the Super Bowl.
Yeah.
That you flew a charter for the Super Bowl, and unfortunately, the team that you flew didn't win.
Yeah. And
it wasn't a good thing.
And the airplane 727 held 129 people, and I think 329 people had reservations somehow. I don't know how, but they wound up canceling the flight and rescheduling everybody to go back home.
Yeah.
But, we carried a lot of the pro football teams and a lot of the college teams. So you got to meet the people that was in the spotlight then.
Did you like flying charters?
Yes, I did.
Change of pace?
It's a change of pace. I flew quite a few charters for General Electric.
Okay.
And I flew, I don't know, I think it was an insurance company chartered a 767 to Helsinki, Finland.
Oh, wow.
Well, we flew over there okay, but they didn't know we were coming.
Oh.
Uh-oh.
I don't know why. That wasn't my part of the flying business. But they parked us somewhere way away from the terminal. It was cold, snowing, and we finally got down to a hotel in Helsinki. And I think here it would be rated as a half star.
In today's time, right?
Yeah. And the only place we could get anything to eat was a McDonald's, and a little bitty hamburger and a couple of French fries that was about half done was about $25.
Wow.
Oh, my goodness.
So that
Unreal.
was not a very
memorable experience.
It wasn't a good one anyway.
No. Well, besides being in the Navy and a commercial pilot, you have flown small airplanes. You've owned many small airplanes, but you also built an airplane.
Yeah, I've owned my own airplane for half of my adult life, and I enjoyed flying in civilian life, in between flights with the airline and things like that. And I was a member of the EAA, and so they come out with an airplane, and I thought I would like to build it. So over 9 years, in 3 moves, I built this EAA Acrosport. It was a wonderful airplane. It flew well. It just didn't have no bad qualities. But it only held one person, so I sold it.
Yeah, and I was looking through the photo book that Allison had. And what did you say it was? That photo book was how many years?
9 years.
9 years from pretty much from frame to all the way to finish. Yeah.
Yeah.
But
it's well documented.
I did everything on building that airplane that I could build. Of course, I couldn't build the engine or the brake system and and the instruments, but all the structural part, the wings and the fuselage, and putting it together and make it a bunch of pieces into an airplane.
And it was amazing. Beautiful. It really was.
But and I enjoyed flying it around locally. But like I say, if it had held 2 people, I'd probably still have it.
Yeah, but there you go.
It was no fun flying by myself everywhere. So I sold it, and I think it was a Cessna 170 that I bought with the money I made off of that airplane. And then I moved from the 170 up to the 182. And then I moved up to the Bonanza, which I owned for 27 years here in my hangar home in Maryville, Tennessee, until about 3 months ago. Because of my age, I sold it because I wasn't flying it anymore, and I didn't figure I had any business to be out there flying when I was in my late 80s.
Let me ask you this. There is a lot of young people today who are very interested in flying, whether it be commercially or just, for the joy of flying. What kind of advice would you give them?
Yes.
To start.
Okay. Private flying has gotten so expensive, very expensive, to rent an airplane to learn to fly. Now, when I learned to fly, I think I got a private license in a J3 Cub, and I think the instructor, renting the airplane and everything, cost less than $1,000.
Wow.
Nowadays, to get a private license, you're looking at about $10,000 to $12,000, maybe $14,000.
And that's just for your basic.
That's just to get.
That's not
a private license.
That's not like multi-engine or anything of that nature.
Oh, you start renting a multi-engine airplane.
So so it's very expensive. So what do they do?
Okay, I would encourage anybody to get involved with the military. The military will teach you how to fly, and they'll pay you while you're doing it.
Right.
And they will use you as a pilot. And a lot of people think the military, when you go to the military, they're going to issue you a rifle and a pouch full of ammunition and send you off to war. Well, that's not exactly the way it happens. Less than 0.5% of the people that join the Air Force, Navy, or the Marine Corps ever see any combat.
So what you're saying basically is if you're interested in a career of flying, the military probably...
That's probably the best place to start. Now, when I hired on with Delta, I'd say 90% of the pilots that they hired was ex-military.
Right.
There was a few that...
I think most commercial air carriers today, they would like to have military experience, but unfortunately, there's not a lot of military pilots coming out anymore.
Okay. The airline would like to have a 21-year-old pilot with 10,000 hours flying time and a PhD in aeronautical engineering. But that's impossible. So they have to go back down to the lowest common denominator that they will take. But primarily, military pilots is who they do take.
So,
because you've got a lot of flying experience behind you, and the airline will tell you up front, we're not in the business of training you to be a pilot. We're in the business of using you as a pilot.
It's a much easier transaction.
So they expect you to be
They expect you to know how to fly when you get
Yeah,
there.
they expect you to know how to fly an airplane and be able to transition into the airplane that you want to fly.
Now, when you went in, of course, you said you had ground school. Approximately how long does that take?
And with the airline, it's 3 months.
3 months?
Yeah.
So each time you go to a different piece of equipment, is it 3 months?
No. To check out on a different piece of equipment, it's about 6 to 7 weeks.
Okay. So initially you got 3 months, and then you start working your way from first officer to captain.
That's right. Well, that 3 months, it's more or less welcome to Delta Airlines. This is Delta Airlines. This is how we operate. This is what we do. And at the same time, you're getting a flight engineer certificate on a D6 and DC6 and a DC7, which only you use for about 3 months, and then you was able to move up. So,
well, and I'm sure, every carrier is a little different, but ultimately I think they're probably all the same in their basic training, that kind of thing.
Well, when I hired on with the airline, I think there was probably 15 airlines. Now there's 3 major airlines.
Mm-hmm.
It's through financial reasons and who knows in world situations, they've had to consolidate. So you got Delta, American, and United basically is your
3
carriers now. But when I hired on, they was all kinds of carriers. Braniff was there, National was there, Eastern was there. They're all gone now.
Absolutely.
Northeast was there, Western was there.
There was a lot. Well, and actually, if you would go and look at the 3 major carriers today and do their backgrounds, you would see they're actually made up of a bunch of these.
Bunch of different ones, yeah.
Oh, yeah. So when an airline took on another airline, it primarily took their people with it, but they had to integrate it into the seniority list.
Now, let me ask you this. Now, when you hired on with Delta, what was your seniority number?
1,088.
And when you retired, what was your number?
About 38.
Wow.
Wow, incredible.
I was on the first page of the first column of the first page.
How many pilots do you think they have now?
10,000.
Wow, that's amazing.
But with the seniority with an airline is everything. That determines what you can do, what airplane you can fly, and where you want to be based.
Well, commercially, it doesn't really matter if you're a pilot or a flight attendant. Your seniority is your life.
Yeah.
Everything is about seniority.
And lower your seniority number is, the more you can do with yourself, more you can control your destiny. There's sometimes that you have to go along with things that you don't particularly like, but it's very few with the commercial airline.
Well, let me ask you this, as we kind of hit about how aviation has evolved, and of course, you started out with the DC-6 and DC-7, and nowadays they're Airbuses and they're glass cockpits, and everything has totally changed from where I know with the 727. Those are planes that the pilots flew.
Yeah.
Whereas today, you have computers that fly.
Yeah.
Do you think that's a good thing?
Well, it is. It could be. But I stayed on the 727 a lot longer than I could. I won't say that I should. I stayed on it because I liked the airplane.
Mm-hmm.
And I was out of about 2,500 or 300 pilots on the 727. I was number about 5 or 6.
Wow.
So I could
hold whatever you wanted.
Pick my trip.
Yeah, absolutely.
And the same way and I stayed off of the international a couple of years longer than I could have done something with it because I wanted to be senior.
Right. Yeah.
and I got to be senior on it. You could bid your trips, and there was one time that I would go to Alaska fishing every summer, and there was one trip that you could fly where you had, I think, 47 days off between trips.
Oh, wow.
Very nice.
So you could go and do a lot of fishing in 47 days.
Exactly.
But you flew a lot of hours to get there. And
Let me ask you this. When you flew international, now, were your flights long enough that you had to have a relief crew?
yes. Okay, we had to have a relief pilot on anything over 8 hours.
Okay. Now, was that just one pilot or a whole crew?
No,
crew?
it's just one pilot.
Just
It's
one
a
pilot?
relief pilot.
Okay.
We had in the 7.5 and 7.6, we had a captain and a first officer. We didn't have a flight engineer.
Right.
He got engineered out of the airplane.
Right.
Boeing engineered that
Position out.
position out because they made it where all the switches and knobs and buttons were up in front of the pilots, which was easy.
Mm-hmm.
But we had on all of our international flights, we always carried a third pilot. And we had worked out a flying schedule, where one guy was resting. In the 7.6 International, we had a thing that made into sort of like a couch in the cockpit where you could lay down and take a nap.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah.
But we had where we played musical chairs
Right.
about every 3 hours. And
Okay.
so it worked out fine. And I really enjoyed flying international wherever I was going. I would say the place that I went the most on flying international was Bombay, India.
And there is one quick little story here. You were in India when your hotel got bombed.
Yeah, well, we got out of there before they got bombed. They had a big uprising between the Muslims and the Sikhs and whoever. And when they get upset in India, you don't want no part of it.
Yeah, got to get out of there.
So they got us out of there real quick, and it so happens that Delta had an airplane there where a crew brought it in, and they put us right on it and flew us out. We flew it out of there. But that's one of those things that you just had to do. And
as a matter of fact, Delta called our home to let us know what was happening.
Yeah, because it was on the news.
And let us know that he was safe and he was going to, on his way.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But there was a lot of trials and tribulations, but you just roll with the flow. And I could spend about the next 5 or 6 hours telling you about incidents in the Navy and in Airline.
Exactly.
But it's not important. I will say in the Navy, one of the things that I did, I went on 2 Antarctic expeditions to McMurdo Sound, Antarctica, and the second year I was a bush pilot flying an Otter, and that probably was the most enjoyable flying I did with the Navy.
I didn't realize till just recently that it takes a lot of permits to get to the Antarctica.
Well,
not just your average person can just.
Right. You can't just pack
go.
up and
No.
It's everything in the Antarctic is controlled by treaty between the countries, and it says what a country can do and what a country can't do.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
A country cannot exploit the Antarctic for minerals or something that's going to make them some money, and the only thing that you can do in the continent of Antarctica is research and scientific experiments. I flew a lot of scientists around to go into various places. That was a lot of them that were working on PhDs.
Right.
That was getting first-hand experience. So,
well, I mean, you've had such a wonderful career. I mean, it's lasted over 70 years.
yeah.
And, you're a wealth of knowledge too.
Very much so.
A lot of young people out there today, contemplating a career in aviation.
A career in aviation, it takes a lot of desire.
Mm-hmm.
You don't just wake up one morning and decide you're going to be a pilot.
No.
It takes months and years and something that you want to do worse than anything else to become a pilot, because it is very demanding.
It is.
It's very hard to break in to the pilot, like in the military or the airline. You just can't break into the airline flying with very little experience. They want trained pilots.
Well, and like I said, the airline business, it's not for everybody, but if that is your desire, absolutely, you do whatever it takes to fulfill that dream.
That's right. You have to start early with your life and stick with it. It takes a lot of stick-to-itiveness to become a military pilot or an airline pilot.
Mm-hmm.
But once you're there, you're there.
Exactly. And before we close, I wanted to get into one real quick one. On this podcast, we have a lot of Bonanza fans and a lot of Bonanza pilots that listen. What was your favorite thing about your Bonanza?
It was a good flying airplane, easy flying. And mine, I owned this Bonanza for 27 years. And what that Bonanza wanted, that Bonanza got.
Oh, absolutely.
So, needless to say, I was making the big bucks with the airline when I bought it. And if it needed a new radio, it got a new radio.
Right.
And if it needed the engine overhauled, it got overhauled.
Yeah.
And that airplane, I guess, took care of me. And it was an easy airplane to fly. However, it was unforgivable of stupidity.
Right.
I would not recommend anybody that's getting interested in flying learn to fly in a Bonanza.
Mm-hmm.
No.
And but with me, it was like putting on an old shoe.
Wow.
I had a lot of hours in it, and I flew it all over the eastern half of the United States for various reasons, and it always came back home. In fact, a lot of the fields that I landed in was pastures. Now, I flew it to Texas, where my brother had a farm down there, and he had a long near a flat pasture, and that was an ideal landing spot for me.
You can't beat that.
No.
So anyway, it was just another avenue for flying. Now then, I don't own any airplanes now, and I don't ever intend to own another one because, like I say, I'll be 87 years old or 88 years old next month. And I think it's time. I knew it was time to quit. And I think a smart person is knowing when it's time to quit. Oh, I can still fly. Flying is like riding a bicycle or swimming. Once you know how, you know how.
Right.
But if you lay off and don't fly like you did with the airline or the Navy, you're not as sharp. But that don't mean you can't fly that airplane.
That's right.
But you may something may happen that you may not know what to do with it.
Exactly.
Well, on behalf of myself and the History of Aviation crew and our listeners, number one, thank you for your service, and number two, thank you for letting us into your home to hear your story.
Thank you so much. We've certainly enjoyed it.
Well, I was glad to share some experiences. Like I say, I could probably fill most of a day with experiences, and some of them I just soon forget, and a lot of them I will never forget.
Absolutely. We definitely appreciate you. Appreciate you, Allison, and appreciate you.
Thank you so much.
Yep.
Bye.
Ernest Hand.
Bye now.